We'll continue to talk about Mitch Kupchak's media availability. This time, we'll go over his reasons as to why they let go of head coach James Borrego, and we'll provide a head coaching search update. That's all today on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
You are Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available wherever you get your podcast. That includes YouTube. I'm Walker Mail, covering Charlotte sports for a variety of different publications. That's Doug Branson, the OG member of the podcast. And if you like us on Facebook, we are on a quest to get 1,000 Facebook likes. And if we do that, it means Doug will dress as the iconic grandmama, looking just like Larry Johnson. Where are we on that production there? Are we getting enough likes, Doug?
Well, we have, I think we just crossed the 300 threshold, but we've had over 40 likes in the last couple of days. So the people are responding, but I know there are a lot more people out there. I mean, we're getting thousands of views on these YouTube clips. So get to liking, folks.
Yep, and then you can see Doug put a dress on, which is what we all want. We want to see him embarrass himself.
The dress is fine. You're going to see a little bit of the dress. I mean, I guess I can get up and walk around a little bit. That's fine.
You're going to have
the pillbox hat and the glasses, I mean, that to me is the most iconic part of the grandmama whole deal. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I got to find this pillbox hat, though. They don't make a lot of these things anymore. I got to go a little boutique shopping.
Well, I'm trying to think if there's any Mandela effect going on for me, because I'm trying to figure out exactly what Larry Johnson wore. What did he have pearls on? Like, did he wear jewelry? I think there was.
Look it up.
Yeah, all right. You go ahead and look at that. Yeah, there were pearls. I got it right here. There were pearls. The glasses are so good. I just like the shoes. Everything is so grandma-y. And then we get to the shoes where it looks like he could go play some pickup right then and there. That would be fantastic. Like us on Facebook, and you can see Doug put that exact outfit on. Let's talk more about Mitch Kupchak, Doug. I mean, we kind of figured this content would last us a few days. It gave us Friday. We talked a little bit more about it yesterday. We'll continue to do it here. We haven't gotten to James Borrego and the reason for Mitch Kupchak and the Charlotte Hornets letting go of one James Borrego. Let's cut to that soundbite right now. Here's Hornets GM Mitch Kupchak discussing some of the reasons as to why they decided to make a change.
A combination of things. Right. Certainly, the way the season ended, right. And then us kind of going through that a year ago, and I don't want to point to that being the reason, because it's certainly not the reason. It's a combination of things. I don't want to list them. If you ask me, I would say, yes, that was a part of it, but I don't want to start listing all the reasons. It's just a feel, a general manager gets. I've been doing this a real long time, and, you're not always right. And this was, particularly a hard decision to make.
It's not like he gave you a ton of information. Mitch Kupchak even telling you that he was going to withhold the details, just outright saying, no, not going to list every single reason why. Among a couple of the times he answered that question on Friday, he said they needed a new voice, to be quite honest with you. There, you hear him say that it was just kind of a gut feeling for a GM, that it was time to move on. Then you also talk about that play-in loss, and it was by 30 points. It was the second straight year where they got destroyed, this time more so in the second half. It was over as soon as it started against Indiana. They never had a chance. First half, the Hornets played awful. They still had a shot. They were still within single digits. I mean, crazy enough to think about. They were still within single digits going into the locker room. And then in the second half, third quarter specifically, they get destroyed. Hornets never have a shot anymore. And that's 2 straight years where they get absolutely obliterated. So, Doug, when you hear Mitch Kupchak talk about some of those reasons, is there more, do you think, to that play-in loss again? Or is there more to this variety of reasons? Just what are your overall thoughts on Mitch Kupchak's reasoning?
Well, and I think what's interesting is how much of this is Mitch Kupchak's reasoning and Buzz Peterson's reasoning, and how much of this is Michael Jordan's reasoning. And, from the sound that we haven't heard yet is, his general explanation of how the process went down. And I think Mitch Kupchak illustrated it such that it seemed as if Mitch made this decision and then informed the ownership of the decision, which I don't, I have a hard time believing that Michael Jordan was just sort of a passive actor in the firing of James Borrego. I obviously wasn't in the room. I don't know what happened. I just have a hard time believing that it was Mitch Kupchak solely making the decision and then just informing, hey, Michael, this team that you own, I'm going to fire your head coach. Okay, cool, great. I have a hard time believing that's happening. Here's the thing. I think Mitch owes... He should communicate more clearly why James Borrego was fired. If it's not just because of that, then he should illustrate what actually it was, because I think it speaks to the fairness of the firing. Because I think a lot of people look at this situation and go, wait a minute, you just extended James Borrego for several years. So what happened all of a sudden that you've decided, no, actually, this isn't the guy that you want leading your organization for a few years? So if you're not going to unleash the reasons, then I think people have a right to say that it was unfair.
Yeah, and that's fine. The only way I would say that it's okay for Mitch to kind of hold this close to the vest is if there was anything he would say that would be detrimental to James Borrego finding another coaching job. And I know guys talk behind the scenes, but I don't want Mitch Kupchak just taking a flamethrower to James Borrego saying, here are the reasons you guys didn't know about that we decided to let him go, right? Like, that's not something, and I think we'd be destroying Mitch for doing that, you know, if because some of the reports were lack of accountability, right? And I don't think you want, if you're James Borrego or his contingency, you don't want Mitch Kupchak out here coming to the public saying he didn't hold players accountable. He just let players do whatever they wanted, or whatever that lack of accountability means. I don't even know what that, specifically what that reporting means. We just know that was the phrasing, and maybe that was a part of the reason. But, there's something in Hoops Hype I know you wanted to get to here that was interesting about James Borrego's firing, right, Doug? About exactly, some other anonymous NBA head coach, what he had to say about it.
Yeah, so Hoops Hype did this whole write-up on kind of taking you behind the scenes of head coaches being dismissed and what that looks like. And there was a quote from a former NBA head coach said, I think there's a lack of decency and humanity in some of these situations. With Borrego, it was a little unfair. He was just extended last year. He was let go this year, which shows there's no consistency in support, or maybe even consistency of aligning goals and expectations. Something convinced them to commit to him 2 more years after last year. Then something drastic made them decommit after winning 2 more games. So, some of that I think is a fair critique of what's going on with this organization, Walker. But then I think the part that's a little bit unfair is not putting enough weight on those play-in losses. Like, if you don't believe that this is a head coach that can win playoff games for you, and the evidence you have are the 2 blowout play-in losses, then I think you have to move on. I think the real critique is the extension. Is not understanding that before you make that commitment.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that throws us all off. We would go to that point of evidence when we would discuss if we thought Borrego was going to get fired. We'd say when we just signed an extension, they did increase their win total by 10 games, even though it was a very real conversation. I still think most people thought, whether you agreed with it or not, that he would be back. And then the play-in loss happens. So when you go to that point in the quote, something drastic had to have happened for him to lose his job. I mean, Doug, they lost by 30 points again. Nobody would have put money on that happening.
No, that team was
a little drastic.
I don't think they weren't favored in that game. Obviously, they weren't playing a home game. But that was a team that was good enough to beat the Atlanta Hawks, certainly not 30. Not get shellacked. So definitely a disappointment. Although I would say the unfairness of a lot of this, in my opinion, is that I don't feel like the organization did a good enough job getting Borrego the tools necessary to actually compete in the playoffs, and then unfairly at the beginning of the season making that the expectation. Now, Mitch Kupchak, as general manager, would then go and roll back those expectations in the middle of the season, saying maybe he got a little ahead of himself. But by then it's too late. You've already set the course of the season. The expectation is make the playoffs. I'm not going to give you an NBA-level big rotation that can compete in the playoffs, but now you have to go and compete, and I think that's unfair. So with this next head coach, I really hope that this organization commits to bringing in roster pieces that are going to actually allow this new head coach to compete in the regular season enough where you avoid the play-in games. There's one simple way that you can ensure that you do not get blown out in a play-in game, and that's to make the playoffs.
Yeah, get better. Get a better personnel.
Get
a better
6
roster.
seed.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And let's
By
talk
the way,
about,
but real quick, the whole Rudy Gobert discussion that we've had multiple times on this show, and people say, well, Rudy Gobert, you can't play him in the playoffs. He gets schemed out of everything. It's like, fine, but he'll get you a 6 seed. You can get to the playoffs. I mean, that's the thing. He helps you avoid the play-in. And then once you're there, if you have a good enough head coach who can strategize and make adjustments, then you deal with that then. But Rudy Gobert helps you get to a 6 seed at least.
All right, let's talk more about that next head coach and who they could possibly be coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. We have a new coaching update from Mark Stein, who talked a little bit about Mike D'Antoni. Is he still the leader in the clubhouse? And is Darvin Ham even still a possibility for the Charlotte Hornets team? We'll get to that in just a moment. All right, NBA fans, are you looking for a daily fantasy option for the NBA? Then you need to try the award-winning app PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. I love it. I know you will too, because it's easy to use. You pick just 2 to 5 players and over-under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry that's just you versus the projected numbers. Entries can be made in just 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. It's safe. It offers fast withdrawals. You can use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. For a limited time, PrizePicks has an exclusive no-brainer of an offer for all of our users. Users get $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point, but you must use code NBA. That's right. This is an exclusive offer available to Locked On fans. So sign up today and use code NBA, $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point. Seems pretty easy. Go to PrizePicks, do the code Locked On fans, get this exclusive offer. It's fantastic stuff.
Do that code.
Do that code. Type that code in. NBA.
Code.
That's right. Exclusive offer. Go ahead and do that code. Let's make that a hashtag. Let's talk about the coaching search update for the Charlotte Hornets coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
This is Locked On Hornets. Our boys got to go Cobra Kai. We got to go 80s villain defense.
Grow a goatee.
Do the gladiator stab them real quick in the ribs before
Have an
the
Eastern
game?
European accent.
Only on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Hornets your first listen every day. Make sure to go check out Locked On NBA Big Board with our friends. They've been on the show. Host Rafael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies and author of the NBA Big Board newsletters, joined by Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, and Leif Tulin, giving fans an in-depth look into the NBA Draft, mock draft, player rankings, and of course, big boards. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Make sure you're following the Locked On NBA podcast on YouTube. That's where we will do our NBA Draft live coverage. Walker and I will both be involved with that. Just want to make a quick programming note. We're not going to get to Mason Plumlee, unfortunately. we got to bump Plumlee again.
Poor Mason, man.
We will do the Mason Plumlee season review. It's coming up, but we've got to bump him. We've got more important things to talk about. And I just want to apologize to Walker before we get started on this segment, because I feel like I was a little bit of a ball hog in the first segment. I'm going to put $1 in the ball hog jar. I was just fired up about that segment, fired up about this Borrego situation. So now I just want to say, all right, I'm going to be a pass first point guard in this segment. Toss it to you.
Doug, I think the bench is all fine. Nobody's mad at you as you come off of the court. I was honestly in a facilitating mode. I did not want to shoot. I didn't have any open looks. This was all your baby, man. You decided to talk about it. That's all fine. I did want to ask, now that we've been introducing ourselves more, all right, so just to give you a little peek behind the curtain, as you can hear in the intro, if you watch the first segment leading into it and you hear all that, I have been introducing ourselves more to just give new listeners a sense of who we are, right? How I've been in the Charlotte market for a while. Doug is the person that gave this podcast life. Now that I have talked about the OG, he did.
I prefer you say that I birthed it.
I'm not going to do that. This is Doug Branson's baby, but he's got 2 children.
What do you
right?
do? How do you make a baby? You birth it.
This is so weird. It's gross. Why are you using that voice? There's no reason to use that voice.
It's a Tuesday. Feeling froggy on a Tuesday.
That's a good excuse. But as I keep saying, Doug is the founder of this. You have been going back deep into the well to try to find some of these old bums to bring us back from break. I haven't even heard these. I've been on for 4 years.
Yeah,
this is. I mean, you're going way back in there. So now I think the OG listeners would appreciate that have been here since day one. All right, let's talk about this coaching search update, Doug. David, as he has wanted to do recently, really within the last month, he is giving us Hornets content. And in our group chat, he gave us this excerpt of Mark Stein and what he had to report the other day.
Steiny bomb.
So let's talk about this for a second. So Mike D'Antoni, maybe not the huge gap as the leader in the clubhouse anymore. Here's what Mark Stein had to say. The buzz going into the Chicago pre-draft camp held that Mike D'Antoni was in a strong position to fill Charlotte's coaching vacancy. There has been some pushback on that view as the week unfolded, with some in-league coaching circles asserting that Hornets owner Michael Jordan might have reservations about hiring an offense all-the-time coach. Let's get to that in a moment. The Hornets, remember, finished 8th this season in offensive efficiency with all-star guard LaMelo Ball at the controls and number 22 on defense. Highly regarded Darvin Ham has already interviewed twice for the post, as has former Nets coach Kenny Atkinson. And the Hornets expanded their search this week by interviewing Terry Stotts. Hornets president Mitch Kupchak announced Thursday that he signed a multi-year extension to stay in his post, but said no firm timetable has been established for hiring Borrego's replacement beyond Charlotte's intent to have a new coach in place for the June 23rd draft. So a little interesting there. If there are some reports that Michael Jordan might not be all in on Mike D'Antoni, what do you make of that little excerpt that we got from Mark Stein on Friday?
Well, again, it just goes back to what I said in the first segment. I really have a hard time believing that Michael Jordan was not involved heavily in the firing of James Borrego, at least part of the meat of that conversation, if he's going to be so involved in what he wants with the next head coach. This is league season, baby. I mean, this, and you have to take into account the fact that there are only two, at this present time, there are only two head coaching availabilities, the Charlotte Hornets and the Los Angeles Lakers. So there is a lot of jockeying going on, leaking going on, could be within the organization to get their preferred candidate some love. It could be within the camps of the different head coaching candidates trying to lift their candidate up, or maybe even leverage one team against another. So I think you have to take all of this with a grain of salt. It's the obvious thing, right? D'Antoni, offense only. The Hornets are a great offensive team already. They need help with defense. It's just playing into a kind of narrative that's already there. I don't put too much stock in it. I still think D'Antoni's going to be the name. I still believe.
Yeah, I still think he's the favorite too. Look, I don't think that the offensive stuff is what people will say, right? It's that the defensive inefficiencies from Mike D'Antoni is overplayed. I think that's probably true. I also think we talk about that so much to the point where people are like, hey, he actually is pretty decent defensively. It's not really the case. Mike D'Antoni is very all in on offense. Do you think enough ground can be made up offensively with this team that it gets you to that 50 win mark that you so much love? And I think D'Antoni would have a great relationship with LaMelo. We've talked about that. You wonder if there would be a ton of ISO ball because that's how he kind of operated in Houston, but that's a completely different player with James Harden. I believe in D'Antoni's ability to adapt to his star players, and I think he would do that with LaMelo. I think he would do that with this roster. So offensively, yes, I totally believe maybe even being a little higher than what it was with James Borrego. But instead of being a top 8 offense, let's say you get to be, let's just move up, 50% of the way. Let's say you're a top 4 offense. How many more wins does that lead to? Is Mike D'Antoni going to be responsible for increasing your defensive efficiency even more so? Or is that just going to be natural improvement of the roster that you have? Is that going to be improvement of the roster that Mitch Kupchak decides to go make? So there are a couple of things that have to happen here, right? Like, I don't think that that's crazy, when people say Mike D'Antoni is all offense. It's a little true. At the same time, he's still a good NBA coach, and I would welcome him, even with Darvin Ham, being right there, who is my favorite. Looks like that might not be happening a little more. We can get to that in just a moment. But what do you think about the offense stuff with D'Antoni? You'd still obviously welcome him in.
So the Hornets had a top 10 offense in the league last year, right? They ranked 8th. Mm-hmm. But if D'Antoni can make them a top 3 offense, if he adds 2 points per possession to the offensive rating, then you're in Atlanta Hawks territory in terms of your net rating. Because, I mean, the Atlanta Hawks 115.4 offensive rating versus the Charlotte Hornets at 113.6. The Hornets defensive rating was 113.1. The Atlanta Hawks were 113.7. The Atlanta Hawks made the playoffs. So, if you get somebody with head coaching experience that can raise your offensive game from 8 to 2 to 1 and I don't think that's outside the realm of possibility that D'Antoni can come
but the Hawks got
Melo and make them number 1.
But the Hawks got the 9 seed. The Hornets got the 10 seed.
That's fine. Again, yes, you need defensive improvements. You need internal improvements on this team, and give hey, here's a wild idea. Give any coach that you bring in, D'Antoni, Atkinson, Ham, whoever it is, give them a center who can defend the rim. Like, give them the tools. And I just don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that the defense, what I'm trying to say, Walker, is the Charlotte Hornets do not need a top 10 defense to compete. Their offense is good enough where they can have the 15th, 18th, 20th best defense and still get into the playoffs. I don't believe that they need a top 10 defense to make this all work.
What you're saying is it's going to come down to personnel anyway. Whatever coach they bring in, it's going to come down to personnel in order to get them to be an average defense, and then you're starting to cook a little bit to see if you can get in the playoffs.
What's really interesting is that the Hornets and Lakers have the same problem, but sort of on opposite ends of the spectrum, right? And they addressed this, I believe. Mike Wilbon said this on ESPN's halftime coverage when they were talking about the Lakers coaching search. Mike Wilbon said, look, it doesn't matter who they hire as head coach. They've got to fix this roster. And the Hornets have to do the same thing. It's just opposite problems. The Lakers have too many older veterans that they need to get rid of and no one else. The Hornets don't have enough veteran leadership. They're not being aggressive enough in the trade market and the free agency market. It scares the toots out of me, trying to be careful here for the YouTube, bro. We keep our rating G here. Scaring the ever-loving toots out of me that, Mitch Kupchak and his media availability said that they might have enough on this roster right now to get better. I just don't believe that. They've got to go out and find something that can help improve the wing defense and the interior defense. Again, not top 10 defense, not what I'm asking for. I'm asking for just a little bit in the regular season to help get them, a 6 or a 5 seed.
You're kind of asking for top 16. Just get me, anywhere, maybe even just from 18 to 14, something like that. Give me that range of defense, and then we'll start to be, pretty decent here in Charlotte. Darvin Ham, by the way, it does look more and more like he is the, as we continue to talk about the favorites for some of these jobs, Darvin Ham, he's the guy most reported to be the favorite to land that Lakers head coaching job. And
yes.
it's not surprising.
I've been telling you this for weeks. Book it. Ham. Lakers.
No more ham and jam. I'm sorry, Doug. That would have been great. You could have put that on a t-shirt.
It's ham and ant. That doesn't sound delicious at all.
No,
really. I mean, James is jam, so you could say ham and jam.
I was going to say ham and James now. It doesn't have the same ring. I don't know if jam is really, like Miles, it fits a little more so with. One question I want to ask before we go to the last segment and not talk about Mason Plumlee again. It's the question, what's the gap in attractiveness between being the head coach of the Lakers and being the head coach of the Charlotte Hornets? Most people, I think, would still go with the Lakers. I don't think it's obvious, though. And the reason being, it's not because the Lakers are a traditional historic franchise. If you want to say, I was the head coach of the LA Lakers, that holds a lot of weight. And I'm not doubting that. But I think we all know the problems that are with that front office, where you have to get some type of confirmation from Kurt Rambis to experiment with your roster as you put it out there on the floor. Like, really? We know about some of the things that LeBron James has control of with the personnel, where he chooses Russell Westbrook. Now you have to try to figure out how the hell to get that off of your roster to the point where it might not happen. Now you're relying so much on Anthony Davis, where he's an injury away again from not allowing you to get to the postseason. It doesn't matter if LeBron's playing like a top 5 player in the league still. He's only getting older, and he was so good last year, he still didn't make the postseason. This roster is really strapped to try to figure out what to do, and I don't know what they're going to do. Plus, it comes with big-time expectations. Your expectations here in Charlotte are just get to the playoffs. The expectations in LA are, hey, we're trying to contend for a championship. I don't care how flawed the roster is. And Mitch Kupchak, even if Mitch Kupchak had his reservations and his problems with the rookies not playing, I feel like that's kind of, your run-of-the-mill problems between GM and head coach. Right? Like, he still allowed James Borrego to do what he wanted, or else you would have seen James Bouknight more, or else you would have seen JT Thor more Thor. It would have happened. Hornets might be the more attractive job. I certainly can make that argument in some respects.
Well, I can just certainly make the argument.
Yeah.
I'll start here, Walker. The old saying goes, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And so if you are one of these head coaching candidates and you behold attractiveness as glitz, glamour being talked about on national television, then obviously the Lakers' job is going to be more attractive. Part of the beauty of the Lakers organization also is part of the horror of working there, in that they will do anything to win championships. They will spend whatever money needs to be spent. They will do what they have to do. But because of the leadership that's currently in there, that means that a lot of decisions sometimes are very questionable in that quest to do whatever's possible to win a championship. And that can be the difficult thing about going to an organization like Charlotte, is that you don't trust necessarily that this team is really committed. If I'm D'Antoni, that's what I want. If I'm going to take this job, I need commitments from Mitch and Michael that, hey, you're actually going to do whatever's necessary to get me to 50 wins. I can get you there. If you can give me the ingredients, I can get you there, but I have to have a commitment from you that you're going to go to the grocery store and buy what I need to make all of this happen. But here's where I think I could make an argument that the Hornets were more attractive. If you get to an Eastern Conference Finals, you will be a legend in the city.
That's right. Thank you.
In the city.
Thank you so much.
Okay, but that's the key part. You have to want to be a legend in the city, because you're not going to be a legend on ESPN, on SportsCenter. They're not going to care. Oh, you made an Eastern Conference Finals with Charlotte? Big deal. Not even going to talk about it. Let's talk about the Celtics.
You'll get your day in the sun, though, nationally. It just won't last forever.
Right. And so, but I mean, if you win a championship, it's like, Budenholzer in Milwaukee. I mean, he's a legend. They'll never forget Budenholzer. They're never going to forget Giannis. So if that's how you measure things, like, I would like to be a living legend in a city in the United States, then that can happen much more easily in Charlotte. You have to do it multiple times in Los Angeles to ever make that happen.
I think you already are a living legend, Doug, at least here as the OG of this
Where's
podcast.
My statue?
Yeah,
that's what I don't know.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Well, first I have to execute the show right. Then I get my statue. Here we go.
Hum diddly dee! It's all right. Now we have to go back to the drawing board. Do that code. This time just with RockAuto. This episode is brought to you by RockAuto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, I really want that to be a thing, to be honest with you. Do that code. Sounds great. It's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? You can save time and money when using RockAuto. So don't choose to spend 30, 50, or even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or new car dealership. They have everything you can need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil. They even have new carpet. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or your truck. You can write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. They have an amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com. Let's talk about the NBA playoffs coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
This is Locked On Hornets.
We got a couple of rookies here. I got David spreading fake news.
Guess what? 4 championship games in a row. Continued success, sustainability.
I've got Steve Bob not plugging in his headphones.
Which I would love to see JaVale McGee, get out there on the ice velodrome or whatever you call those things.
This is a professional show we're trying to run here.
Only on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I was going back and listening to some of my older audio, like from years ago, which is kind of the same what you're hearing now with these pumps. Doug, you're growing up. Like you can hear the voice mature because you're probably, I mean, you're certainly late 20s in that. You know, I feel like I could hear not as much bass in the voice in that bump when you said you were trying to run a professional show. Do you feel like you hear that too, or did it not click?
No, it was a lot of years. And I used to run the show. I used to be in your seat, Walker, and that they wore on me. Just dealing with David and Steve Bob every day. That wore me down. And that's why I'm in the clown seat now. I decided I want to, when we brought you on, I was like, I need you to run the show. I need to sit over here and be the clown because it's wearing on me.
Yeah, you're a good clown, Doug. You're so good. You're great, and we're gonna try to get you to dress. Yeah, and we're gonna try to get you to dress up as a clown. As long as we get 1,000 Facebook likes, he will dress as Grandmama. It should be great.
I think it's an interesting question, though. Would my voice sound like this now if the Hornets had won 50 games once? I think that's part of what's wearing on me too. Is that year after year, we are dealing with the same old. Like, come on, let's do something. Let's win 50 games. Let's relive those late 90s, early aughts glory days. Come on.
Well, I know one of the things you wanted to talk about were these teams that did win 50 games in order to get to the playoffs, in order to get to the conference finals, at least to get to the second round. Even some of those teams, Doug, will get destroyed in these playoff games. We've seen a ton of blowouts in this NBA postseason. We just saw it again last night with the Miami Heat. They took a beat down from the Boston Celtics, and that series has been kind of going back and forth, unexpectedly, right? You think Boston's going to win because Miami is without Jimmy Butler. Turns out Miami has a Bam Adebayo explosion. They're able to win. It's just unexpected, right? We've seen a bunch of blowouts this postseason. And I think you brought this up. James Plowright, if I'm not mistaken, put this tweet out saying, look, I know the Charlotte Hornets, they had 30-point losses. They had a couple of shellackings in the last play-in tournaments consecutively.
I can read it if you want.
Go ahead. I didn't know if you had it up. Go ahead.
James Plowright at British_Buzz. He does work for Sports Illustrated and at The Hive. On Twitter says, I know the play-in losses were bad the past 2 years, but watching the playoffs, every team can have an off night and look awful. The Suns, Warriors, and 76ers have all lost by 30-plus points already this postseason. That's the tweet from James, and you can add the Heat to that list because they just got a drubbing. I don't know if it was 30 points, but it might as well have been 1,000 by the Celtics last night.
No, and I think it's a good point to talk about, with these talented teams enough to bring it up and say it happens. I guess for me, Doug, it kind of goes out the window when it's a one-in play-in game. You've got one chance to do this. Mm-hmm. And you also have the reminder of the year prior, right? Like you have that stat, you have that box score hanging in the locker room as this motivation. You actually have play-in experience. You were just in the same spot last year, so you have some type of experience to draw upon, and it still happened. Because remember, we just talked about it. In the first half, it is not like they played well. It was a blessing that they were only down single digits heading into the second half. The halftime, it comes about. You don't have this win one for the Gipper speech or just the self motivation to come out in the third quarter and say, hey, that was awful in the first half. Let's come out and show a lot more sense of urgency. No, they just get beat down even more. That's so I actually understand that point. I think it's a good point to bring up. I just think it goes out the window when you have that experience to draw upon. It's still the same guys that experienced it. You have a one-game scenario to try to fix it. You don't have a series. You got to play it like a Game 7. Yes, Phoenix got destroyed in Game 7. Maybe that is the comparison. But they also might be tired. They also had some player turmoil going on with DeAndre Ayton, which we're going to talk about tomorrow. I do think there are enough differences to say, hey, Borrego, Hornets, not okay for that to happen 2 years in a row.
I think it's a point, and much love to my guy James Plowright. I don't know if it's a good point because the difference between the Suns, Warriors, 76ers, and Heat and the Charlotte Hornets is that they put themselves in a position in the regular season such that I think somebody's at my front door. That was a good a little ringy dingy. So they put themselves in a position such that they could afford to slip and fall. It's, here's the analogy. You go to the club, you go to the bar or whatever, and if you're out on the dance floor and because somebody spilled their drink and you slip and fall, the bouncer's not going to come and be like, all right, buddy, you're out of here. You slipped and fall on the dance. No, you're already on the dance floor. People slip and fall. It happens. But if you're just sitting at the bar and you fall out of your seat, the bouncer's going to come over there immediately like, buddy, you got to get out of here. You've had too much. You're cut off. That's what happened to the Hornets in the play-in. The bouncer said, look, buddy, you weren't even on the dance floor yet and you're slipping and falling. Like, you're just sitting over there getting blasted. Okay?
Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever been kicked out?
These analogies don't.
You said you wanted this to be a G-rated podcast. Yeah,
these analogies don't come from nowhere.
Right.
So my point is, get on the dance floor, and then let's have I think there's an interesting conversation to be had. And I don't know that we have a solid answer for it, but like why these blowouts are occurring like this. It's not just in the playoffs, by the way. I mean, I saw some stats earlier in the season where just like 20-point, 30-point margins are generally on the rise. And, there's a big question as to why that's occurring. I think the game is changing. The 3-point shot, we didn't, when the game changes significantly like that on a strategy level, you don't really know the ramifications of that until, 5, 10, 20 years down the line when you can really look back and examine it from a macro level. So I think we're seeing a lot of that. But the point is, don't put yourself in the do or die position. Get yourself on the dance floor. You can afford to have a game 2 slip up and still compete in a series.
That might have happened to me. I'm not confirming it. I'm just saying that it might have happened to me on my 21st birthday. Went out and Noda, man. Friends brought me out. I'm just saying it might have happened. Not sure exactly. Right. So maybe I can understand that analogy that you bring up. So that's it.
I don't want to talk about it anymore. What I'm saying is get yourself on the dance floor. If you get on the dance floor, people will excuse that behavior. I was just moving and grooving a little too much.
Sometimes that happens. All right. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Make your second listen Locked On NBA. From the first jump ball of the play-in tournament to the last possession of the finals, Locked On experts take you deep inside the playoffs with insight and analysis affecting all 30 teams. That'll do it for today. We'll be back with you tomorrow on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Do that, Coach.
Dude.